All right, welcome everyone to this webinar that I'm particularly excited to be presenting. I'm Matt Kropp of the Vermont Employee Ownership Center, co-executive director. And the idea for this webinar, which will feature Michael Elwood-Smith, who's one of the co-founders of Loomio, which is a worker cooperative that develops and maintains a kind of asynchronous decision-making platform amongst other activities. But this idea for a particular webinar focused on remote work and participation in the context of an employee-owned company that's been doing this for a while. Came out of some conversations within the Employee Owners of Vermont group as one topic that's quite timely, as everyone has accelerated into the world of remote work very quickly since the COVID crisis started. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Michael. One thing, he'll go through his presentation and then we'll have some time for questions and discussion. At any point during the conversation, I'll be kind of running the back end, and if you want to submit something through the Q&A feature, you're welcome to. And then when we reach the discussion point, I do want to say we are recording, so if you want to submit questions and not be on the recording, you can do so through the Q&A. If you're fine with being on the recording and would like to sort of join the conversation, you can raise your hand, and when we get to the portion for discussion, anyone who's raised their hand, I'll kind of add them to the mix and we can kind of have more of an open conversation. So with that, I'll pass it to Michael. Thank you for doing this today.
Thanks very much, Matthew, and it's wonderful to see you. It's early here on a Friday morning, so I'm already calling from the future. We really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our experience of being remote when everybody has suddenly had to move remote. So I'll just kick into this presentation and take you through who Loomio is and some of the patterns and rhythms that we have developed over the years for working remotely and collaboratively together. Remote collaboration, the agenda, if you like, I'd like to just take you through is firstly just to give you an introduction to who Loomio is and something about our story, where we've come from. Take you through a quick tour of our app, and then look at how we've been working to build a collaboration culture, some of the practices and rhythms. And then, as Matthew said, we'll have some time for questions after that. So our origins began back at the early part of the decade during the Occupy movement, where essentially the Occupy movement was about helping to restore or raising the issue of inequity in our world. And that 1% of the power and energy was with, 99% of the power and energy was with less than 1% of the population. Some of our founders were involved deeply in the movement at that time, and they noticed that what really came out of that for them was noticing the potential for participating in decision making, how people can actually achieve things when you hear from other people, when you have the opportunity to speak, where you have diversity of input. And that works fine if you happen to be all there at the same time, at the same place. However, how can you do that when you are physically remote or people cannot be there? So the inquiry really was, well, how can we take the benefits of a process, participatory decision-making process like this, and move it online and make it more scalable? So from the beginning, Loomio was highly purpose-driven and remains so. And in essence, Loomio intends to empower people everywhere to make decisions together for a thriving and equitable future. So this is our driving mission statement. The reason that we believe this is important is that decisions being made together actually help people to feel a part of and responsibility for the decisions that are made, and that by engaging people in decision making, there's an opportunity to have more adaptive organizations, more participatory government, empowered citizens, and resilient communities. So if you think of how your organization can benefit by hearing from other voices, from your staff, from your fellow workers. That at times that can be tough, but it's also an opportunity to make a better decision. We founded very soon after that 2011, and as with a lot of founding, it was totally startup world. We founded in a co-working space with a group called Inspiral, which is a social enterprise organization, and helping people to create ventures and do good. We set up as a social enterprise from the beginning, with our social mission as a core to that, and we also developed Loomio as a cooperative. We felt it was important to live these values and this mission by actually structuring our company in a way that would enable us to live this out. We did crowdfunding, we started the ball rolling. And people and culture have been at the core of Loomio from the beginning. This particular image is taken from one of the retreats, and I'll touch on that a little bit more. But a number of people have been involved, and certainly whenever I speak for this, I feel the strong sense of stewardship of all of the people that have contributed to achieve what we have done so far. So let's touch on decision making for a bit. Why decision making? Well, where decisions are made is often where the power and also the responsibility. You can't have power without sharing also in the responsibility for this. Now, making decisions with other people and to involve them is not an easy thing to do. And then how are you even going to do that remotely? So meetings, of course, are one of the most common ways that we do that in person, but quite often you're pressured for time. You have people with louder voices speaking that tend to dominate conversations. You can feel under a lot of pressure to be making decisions, and perhaps even at the end of the meeting, it's not even clear what decision has been made. Try doing that on a Zoom call. We've all been doing that now with online. I'm sure many of you have been doing this, and endless back-to-back Zoom calls perhaps isn't the answer either. It's certainly part of the puzzle. Chat tools, getting lost in communication. If you're not there at the time and following that thread, how do you keep up to speed? Or the old favorite, just reply or email, broadcast a message out to everybody and get lost in the endless email chain. It's also interesting to consider what and how are we going to make decisions? Are there processes actually to help? And the answer is yeah, there have been. There's a lot of work going into the space. On tools side, in the digital communication space, we often think of it as a kind of trinity of tools. I'm sure we'd all like to have one tool to fit everything. Reality is that in communications, we have different ways of interacting, different ways of communicating, and we need different tools for different purposes. Right now we're on Zoom, we're in a real-time video call, which is an opportunity to talk synchronously. Asynchronous actually has a place of its own too. You've already been using it for email, discussion forums, and Loomio fits into this space as well. Asynchronous communication gives you the opportunity to consider a little bit more about what you're saying. So we often hear people report back that work that they are doing asynchronously is more considered, is more serious, is actually helping people to progress discussions and not getting lost in noise. And then bringing all of this into a document or into a wiki, some other collaborative or online document repository is important to actually capture the knowledge that you are building in the organization. Rich Bartlett, you can learn more about some of his thoughts from the Hum, which is Rich is a co-founder and a cooperative member of Loomio, and is with his partner Nati, has a consultancy called the Hum. So let me tell you a little bit about collective decision making through Loomio. So Loomio architecture is actually quite straightforward. It's where people gather together, whether they be a community group, a government organization, a working group, a board, even bringing together public in an engagement or stakeholder engagement process. Have discussions, talk about the issues that are important, make decisions on this, and take action. So at heart, that's what Loomio has been set up to do, help people to have discussions, make decisions, and take action. And the phrases in our software that we use are a group of people, it's the most generic form, a thread, which is a discussion thread, common in discussion forums. By the way, the word Loomio actually comes from the reference to loom and the weaving together of threads to make a stronger tapestry, if you like. So there are some origins behind our name as well. A decision is generally taken place in a proposal, and then outcomes. You know, it's so important to actually identify what was decided and let everybody know about that. So I'm going to just take you through a quick, this is about a 2.5-minute video, and this will be a quick intro to Loomio. Oops, I'm sorry.
Welcome to Loomio. Loomio is a discussion tool where your group or team can make decisions together and create a shared understanding of your challenges and resources. This is how a thriving Loomio group looks like. But let's start smaller. Let's start with a brand new group. Brilliant. So what do I do here? Let's start a thread. This is going to be a page dedicated to a single conversation. It can be a group call to action, or maybe a creative challenge, or even a collaborative financial decision, just like this one. Inside the thread, not only the theme of the conversation is clear to everyone, but you can also add all sorts of supporting information, like links to other pages, images, and you can even tag people who might have one extra piece of the puzzle. Below is where the discussion really happens and collective intelligence emerges. It's less like a social media platform or instant messaging and more like a super easy to plug in email thread. Here at the bottom is where you can add your thoughts, your contribution to this conversation. Or you can also use one of our facilitation tools. They serve many purposes. You can approve a document, find a time for everyone to meet, make budgeting decisions as a group, and many, many more. So let me give you an example and let's explore a decision together. So here's a decision about rating our 2019 workshop providers. So what do I think about those workshops? The Canvas training, it was okay. It was okay. The leadership training felt like watching a bunch of YouTube videos. The data protection workshop was life-changing. And the gamification one was good. It was okay. Here below you can add extra crucial information along with your vote. And let's do it. Let's vote. When the time limit for a decision is reached, then the creator can share the decision's outcome. So it becomes crystal clear to everyone involved what decision was reached. In this case here, 2 of the companies were super well rated and we'll carry on with them, and 2 of them, maybe we should look for new providers. Yeah. That was just a quick introduction. But as you've seen, with Loomio it's easy to have conversations that get to clear outcomes, making it simple to build something together. And I really mean together. You're 1 click away from trying Loomio for free. I'll see you there.
Well, I hope that video came through all right, given the bandwidth that everybody's on at their homes. Let me take you through another level down, just to give you a taste of how we use Loomio. So discussion threads there are many ways, as you saw in that video, that we can use a discussion thread. So asking a question, there's an opportunity coming up. What should we do about this with your colleagues? Preparing for an event. If you have an AGM coming up, or perhaps you need to consider how that's going to run online. Let's have a discussion about that. Completing the document. We often see people building strategic plans together, writing constitutions, updating key documents, posting things over time. This is something we use a lot, where we're looking, one of my favorite threads is customer feedback, where we post information that comes in through our customer support channels and other channels. And it keeps a nice record of what has been talked about, and an opportunity for us to go back. We have the opportunity to report and reflect. How did our last newsletter run? What were the metrics? What was some of the feedback that we got from this? The opportunity to do a retrospective. And of course, making announcements. Essentially, it's a posting place, so a great place to get people aware. It's also a good place where you can post an idea, but know that you're not having to spam people with email. So you want to make transparent your thoughts about something and open up a discussion, but perhaps don't want to send an email to broadcast to the whole company. Proposals and polls. We have quite a suite of these, from a time poll, which is a place where you can organize a meeting together, dealing in different time zones, and then send through the calendar invitation. The check poll, which allows you to indicate, have I done something? Have I read the minutes? Do I approve the minutes of the meeting? Have I prepared for the meeting coming up? Who's volunteering to help me with this project? Polls, score polls, dot votes, as you mentioned, as was mentioned in the video. A dot vote is like a budget, which really helps you to prioritize options. Very useful in strategic planning. Ranked choice, we perhaps touched on. How to organize and vote to put your preference at the top. And proposals. I'll speak a little bit more about that. Let me give you some examples of how Loomio is using Loomio. We use it for coordinating our work. In this particular thread, we have a subgroup called the Comms and Marketing Group. And this thread was started by me to coordinate our communications meetings between Medina and John and I. And so I can also see here who's been watching. So this is a great opportunity that in our working group for communications, we have 9 other people in the organization are able to watch and see what's going on and jump in as and when they're needed. But primarily, this is a working place for Medina, John, and I. We have links into coordination, into other documents, calendars, and so forth. And down the bottom here is the opportunity to mention people, to comment, to get their attention about something. You may have seen the comments before. The formatting options are all there to add. And the other key feature I wanted to point out for this one was the timeline. As a thread is developing, you're able to build a timeline of the communications. So, when is that customer ready for an interview? What were the actions from our meeting on May the 5th? And so forth. What did we do in our coronavirus response way back in March 18? So we have this easily accessible and searchable record to find information from our discussions and the decisions we took. As the pandemic was breaking out, on March the 17th, Rahul from our team posted the option, we should start working from home. So this was an announcement, but an announcement and a question that was affecting everyone. That quickly moves into a proposal. Do we agree this? I propose that we start moving. I think my response back here was a green tick. Yes, I agree to this. Our daily stand-ups will be valuable for keeping in touch. And then as we're doing this, we see this chart building, which is recording the progress of the poll. At the end, I mentioned when that proposal closed, how do we state an outcome? We wanted to make this pretty clear what we had agreed to. So an outcome is stated that we'd agreed to these protocols. Another thing that's helpful here is just to note that it doesn't have to be a final decision. This particular decision was, we're going to review, see how this is working in 2 weeks' time and continue from there. Another example is in governance. We use Loomio a lot in our board to prepare for the next board meeting, to post the minutes of the previous meeting, to post up the agenda for the meeting that's coming, and to invite people to the board members to consider the questions and the topics that they want to discuss in the board meeting. This is where I post board papers, financial documents, all of that in advance. And the thread itself has a conversation related to what board members would like to discuss. This allows members to arrive at the meeting more informed and more in context with the information. We use it to approve plans. This is a great opportunity to do this between meetings, so making decisions of a board mid-cycle. What are those decisions that we don't actually have to wait to the next board meeting that we can move forward? So in this particular case, we were approving our annual plan that we revised back in November, and then posting it as the outcome up into the shareholders group. Now, just shifting gear for a second, the third part of what I'd like to tell you about is how we organize for remote work and how we organize our own collaborative work together. So over the last 8 to 9 years, the way that we've organized has evolved. In the early days, we often fondly refer to it now as a swarm, as we had a lot of people involved in the project. And the best way to govern that was to have a weekly all-hands meeting, get everybody in together, work through the issues, and decide progress. As we developed beyond this, we had some more funding. We started structuring the company into a company. We focused on developing work programs that could deliver specific outcomes. And some of these work programs and the coordination of this are indicated by this illustration, almost like an underground map, which indicates the different kinds of work groups that we had running: operations, board, capital investment, community work, product development. A significant shift in the way that we worked was when we embraced Agile. And we didn't just embrace it in the product development ability, but in fact, the way that we were organizing the work that we do. And this has given us a significant edge that's allowed us to be responsive and flexible to the changing needs. And that really has brought us into today for the operations that we run. We develop rhythms. We find that rhythms are really important to keep, if you like, the drumbeat of how the organization is running. This gives us the opportunity to both balance the work that we're doing and remain resilient and responsive to changing circumstances. Really important when working remotely. Coming together at least once a year for a strategic view is important. Typically, we do that off-site. We go to a retreat, we go find somewhere nice in the countryside where we can actually share time together, work to both get to know each other better, but also to talk about the issues that often get lost when we're dealing with the day-to-day operations. We do quarterly planning, which gives us the target points for what is coming up in the next quarter to deliver on that strategic plan. And the real rhythm that we focus on here is this 2-week sprint, where the sprint starts with a sprint planning meeting. We have a daily stand-up, which is a check-in, and that has been really important to while we're working remotely. It is the opportunity to sink in and ask the question, what have I done? What do I need to do? Do I have any blocks? Anything preventing me from moving forwards? And we use this to adjust the teams and the working groups depending on the work and how that work is changing and evolving over time. We have a number of the patterns, some I've touched on already, this planning and sprint cycle and the working groups. As you've seen, we use Loomio a lot to be able to actually communicate with each other and to keep things transparent. Now, working with others and making decisions with others, takes time and practice. And we do find that the more transparent we can be, then the much easier it is to bring other people into the context when an important decision is required. It's also critical for us to be looking after each other. How do we take care of the work that we are doing? How do we take care of people who are shouldering perhaps a bit too much of the responsibility? And we have some cooperative membership. So people that come to work with us at Loomio start on a path towards cooperative membership. And the cooperative membership and the structure has been very critical to us, and I believe is a total reason why we have survived through the ups and downs that come with the startup world. And this resilience of cooperative membership, of having that place where I, along with my cooperative members, own a single voting share, which has no direct monetary value, but it allows me a stake in the decision making in the organization. So be able to provide this opportunity to new members is very valuable. Last couple of points, and then I end. We have, of course, experienced challenges, many challenges. We experienced challenge of funds with investments, with enough money to pay people, ongoing funds, how to actually arrange that investment. We've been challenged with our business model many, many times, and continue to evolve and develop that. So finding a way to build a sustainable growth while also delivering on our social mission has been core to a lot of our discussions and decision making over the years. Conflict, we're all people, and people do come into conflict. How do you develop a process that allows you to resolve that while still remaining and having effective working relationships? Maintaining the rhythm. Sometimes it's the rhythm actually, the drum beat just slips off a little bit, just gets a little out of sync. And the importance of coming back. We were recently reminded of the value of retrospectives, something that we do at the end of our demo of our sprint time. Having some time to actually reflect on the work that we have been doing together, how we've been working together, allows us to surface up issues and problems that may otherwise be turn into grudges or other sorts of problems. So figuring out and how we can improve and continue to improve our work through a retrospective is very important. Investment and structure. So cooperatives, if you're in a cooperative, you know that raising money in a cooperative is not always the easiest thing to do. We've had to make some changes in our structure over the time, create some investment vehicles that would allow our investors to work and to invest effectively while still getting a good return. And changes in team size. I've shown different pictures here of small and large teams. And Loomio has been through that. We have had very large teams down to small teams, back up to mid-sized teams. And with people coming and going, then how dealing with that and the changes in dynamic is like rebuilding a team every time when you have a new person that joins. And the last point I'd say is bottom lining. I've touched on it already, the responsibility that comes, that the buck stops here. When you are a worker, owner of the business, then how do you both cope with the buck stopping with you? At the same time, how do you embrace the cooperative structure that you have around you and support you so that it feels like you are sharing that responsibility? All of that I've talked about there are a series of resources that you can find from our website. We have written a lot about how we operate as a co-op on Loomio.coop. There's guides and information about how to run board meetings, how to do remote working, how to run an AGM, how to facilitate stakeholder engagement, all under help. And in blog, we tell stories of our customers, and there are many wonderful stories in there to inspire you. You can, of course, start and have a look at Loomio yourself. It's a free 14-day trial, and on this webinar, we have a coupon code as well. If you sign up, please use this to get 25% off your first year of your annual plan. With that, I'm going to pause and stop, and I hope that you've been with me through that time.
Great, thank you, Michael. So as I said at the beginning of this, I'd invite folks to both kind of submit any sort of questions or thoughts via the Q&A thing, or if you would like to ask and kind of join the discussion in person, right? As part of the video call, you can raise your hand, and then I can sort of let you in. But I did want to sort of seed the discussion with sort of a first question. Just you raised conflict resolution as a key point in the life of your company, and I think that that one of the limitations or challenges that I both have seen in my own experience of this, and also in conversations I've had with others, has been around this question of almost the emotional bandwidth of being apart versus together, being so much more of the body language and other things that that when people are in conflict are so important for us kind of processing that conflict. Do you have any kind of thoughts on ways in which the organization has experienced conflict with people who aren't in the same space a lot, and things that have either helped or not helped, or been harmful things to avoid in those sorts of situations?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Perhaps the biggest area of conflict that we have seen arise has come where people are working more remote than other people. So if we have a core group of people that are, for example, in the office working day by day or in context, and then we've got people in the US, in Europe, that are connecting in from time to time, it's very hard for them to keep up to speed with the day-to-day working that's going on. And sometimes they can see the speed that the working team, the local working team is going much faster than they expect, or rather decisions have been made that they felt they didn't have enough opportunity to come into. So yeah, so despite everything I talk about, we're still dealing with humans here. So all the tools that we try to put into place are to try to help us to navigate our humanness. The ways of resolving that are it's a reminder, firstly, for local teams to work as if they are remote. So it's very, very hard if you've got one or two people who are primarily remote and the rest of the team is working in an office. So you're either all working remotely, or you're all in the team, and you recognize that this person can really only participate in a limited capacity. So that's been important. When issues do arise, we have a stewarding system in place that allows somebody to reach out to a peer and say, hey, I was a bit worried that this decision was fast-tracked. I felt like I was not included in that, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. So peer stewards have the opportunity to connect with a person, not in any kind of line management way, but in a way to hear through the issue. And stewarding can be really valuable in this way, because and it takes some care and responsibility, of course, of a steward to listen through to somebody's grievances. the steward is not there to actually solution or necessarily even to resolve it. So what we have found is that when conflict arises, it's always good to get at least a third person in the space to have that opportunity to moderate, if you like, a conversation, to allow people to be heard, and therefore to be space to be responded to. And if you have two stewards there, then you've got effectively two moderators, that are actually helping and supporting, and they're not really engaged in whatever the conflict might be, but they're there to actually help support somebody through. And I'd say probably about 95% of conflicts and so forth have been resolved through that process. There's only been one time that we needed to bring in an external moderator to help facilitate a particularly gnarly set of issues that we were dealing with, and that worked out well as well. Again, once there are times when you have to recognize that professionals actually are good. There's a reason why we have professionals.
So one other question that I've seen, and I think a lot of folks have kind of struggled with, but have been dealing with a lot more in this moment as everyone's been moving online, has been this question of onboarding people who are remote, and it's something where oftentimes it's traditional onboarding processes are bringing people in, getting them acclimated to the culture, having kind of peers help them navigate sort of how to find what they need to find depending on the size of the organization, of course. But having had team members in New Zealand, US, Europe, etc. What have you found to be effective in kind of bringing someone in for whom it's going to be a challenge to get them to New Zealand to do sort of an orientation?
Yes, to start with, there's generally has been some conversation that's taken place as well through a wider network. So we have some knowledge and experience of the other person. But the way that we have typically worked with this is to set up regular calls. So a regular check-in point is quite critical, and also to recognize that there's a responsibility for somebody in the organization to help onboard a person. So naming that person who is onboarding and recognizing this is part of their job is really important. It can't be just left to chance. And then the opportunity to as quickly and easily as possible to work the new person into in our case, the sprint rhythms. What are those rhythms and patterns that they can see how the sprint work is coming together. That you would then check with that person afterwards. So you see what happens, in here. We talked about this work here, and we move this here. This is kind of how we roll. So just working through and helping them to understand that. And I mentioned earlier about the retrospectives, that opportunity to actually reflect back. I remember one situation where we didn't get it very as right as I thought we were getting it, but we were quite surprised where we had an operations person that said in a retrospective, because this was the opportunity, the place to actually say this, and she had the courage to say this. She said, I see you all like answering emails and putting messages on Loomio over the weekends and in the evenings and so forth. I just can't work like that. I need to, I want to come and work from 9 to 5 and those are my hours, and just let me do my job for that, but don't expect me to do all these other things. And so it was a bit of a moment for us to realize, yeah, we are operating a little bit like a startup culture, but we've got to grow up here and actually, recognize that for us to scale and grow, we need people who, come in and do work in fixed hours. That's critical to us. So I think what I'm, I guess, trying to say is that it's a very purposeful thing to actually onboard a person. It doesn't happen by accident. You need to have regular check-ins with that person, and make sure that they have the opportunity to respond and reflect on what's working for them and what's not working for them.
Great. So we're starting to have some questions come in from attendees. So first one here is kind of about onboarding and getting people to adopt collaborative tech. So any suggestion how to get people groups started with Loomio, where to begin? Also thoughts on how to deal with people who are resistant to using Loomio, or I think this is also generalizable to lots of platforms, right? Instead use email. Example, you send a time poll and some people respond via email. So that kind of, and I'm sure everyone who's used these sorts of things see that, like, okay, there's certain tools that people are comfortable with, and then you try to introduce a new tool, and there's all sorts of dynamics around kind of adding that to the mix. So do you have thoughts on or insights into that?
Yes, we do. Firstly, before introducing any tool, because tools, look, we all have tool fatigue, and I'm with you all on that too. So before introducing any tool, consider the problem that you're solving with this tool. What actually is the issue that's at hand? Where we've seen that effective is there was a board, the chair of a board that I spoke to a few months ago, and I asked him that question. I said, what problem are you trying to solve? And he said, well, we had 52, I counted 52 emails between board meetings, and we can't do governance by email. So it was like the communication had just exploded electronically, and they were unable to keep track of it. Another problem case I heard similar, again, actually, it was a volunteer board. They said, our meetings are, we're volunteers, our meetings start at 6 o'clock on a Monday evening, and they're still going after 10 p.m. And it's just too much. We can't deal with this volume. So if you get to the heart of the heart of the problem, then that helps you to say, okay, are people actually up to looking for a solution? What is the potential solution? Can we try something? And so to onboard somebody, the first thing to do is remind them of the problem that you're solving, not that you're just randomly inviting them to something. So we've found as well that successful groups have a very clear purpose and are very clear about why they're doing a thing in this way. And then you have to remind people from time to time, well, do you want to go back to having 4-hour-long meetings again? If we all get into this together, then actually let's give this a shot. So you kind of have to get, ask for their agreement to try to give something a go for a period of time. If it doesn't work out, fine, drop it, move on, look for something else. But that's really the essence of it. A couple of other little tips I'd just say too is start small, start easy. So one of the simplest ways we have found is to work a tool into the existing rhythms. Don't try to go in and change your culture overnight with your collaboration process. Come in with, for example, too many people are arriving at our meetings not prepared. How can we improve that people are arriving to the meeting in context? Well, let's put some information up onto Loomio and allow them to read that, and then use a little simple check function to indicate that they have read the information, they have asked the questions, they are arriving in context. And so these little things, they're like small micro improvements that can begin to help people to actually become more onboarded to the tool. So
that I think provides a little bit of a segue into the next question here, which is sort of that almost like creating moments of accountability. So I've worked in places where everything has a DRI, directly responsible individual, so that everyone knows where to go and who will ensure progress. Is this still needed in Loomio? Is the platform itself the DRI?
We in these working groups I mentioned earlier, we often appoint I suppose it would be a DRI in this the directly responsible individual, the person that's facilitating this particular group. And so when that is clear, who is coordinating the group, then that person, yes, is essentially a DRI. And by naming that person, and by them taking, if you like, responsibility for the coordination and the work that's taking place in that group, then you are doing so. One of the things that we often do in Loomio and encourage you to be successful with any group is be clear on its purpose, be clear on who's actually participating in the group, be clear on who's facilitating, coordinating, the DRI person of the group, and give some idea of what outcome and the intent, if you like. What is the group there to achieve? Is it an operations group or is it a project-related group?
Great. All right, so the next question is, if you recognize your team is not maintaining a rhythm when working on a project, what strategies do you use to reestablish the rhythm in order to keep progress on track?
It's actually maintaining the, I would say, almost sacrosanct nature of having that regular sprint planning meeting. That is the key. If we start seeing that slip because project pressures and so forth are coming in, then it's a real indication that things are beginning to get off track, going off into silos and so forth. And we've got some amazing developers, and if you've worked with software developers, you may also know that they can get quite focused on doing the thing that they're doing, particularly if they're totally in the zone. And so breaking them out of that, can sometimes be a challenge. But yeah, keeping, getting back to that meeting time. So, a lot of what I talked about within Loomio is kind of asynchronous, but we're actually using it in a way to synchronize our work and synchronize our rhythm to come back on track. So another strategy that has helped, I mentioned the retrospectives. So a sprint planning rhythm works from, we run at the beginning of the sprint a planning meeting, which is typically about an hour, and we have these daily half-hour stand-up meetings, which we do online. And then at the end of the sprint, we have a short demo, which is a great opportunity to demonstrate the work that has been done. And it also encourages you to actually complete work. So the whole concept of sprint is actually to try to identify work that can be actually completed within that 2-week period, and then work towards completing that. So demo that, and then hold a retrospective. Did we overestimate that, or I haven't completed this work? Was it more complex than I thought? And so by holding those rhythm points, they allow us to see whether a project is on track or not on track. And frankly, over the last couple of months, while we're all remote from home and dealing with different situations, with personal life and so forth as well, there's been times when we've had to say, okay, that thing is going to have to wait for a couple of weeks. We're reprioritizing. So, the sprint planning work is about identifying the work that you're going to do, agreeing with the rest of the team that the value of that work, prioritizing that work, working to try to achieve it, but the actual team itself also coming on board to help you to achieve it, so that it's not just you solely carrying the can.
So one of the other things in your presentation I found interesting and I think is and raised a question for me was around the 3 types of kind of forms of communication you tagged, the sort of live communication, chats, meetings, the asynchronous communication, forums, emails, and then the sort of static, which was the documents, that documentation, that sort of thing. I feel like there's often sort of a joke of like a meeting that could have or should have been an email and that sort of thing. But in terms of actually kind of setting the clear expectations and boundaries about what types of communication should go through each type of medium, or And if there's different have you discovered, I guess, different rules of thumb in a way in terms of having a sense of, oh, this type of thing really should just be kind of a ephemeral chat versus, a formal thread that kind of, that's part of this permanent context. How do you approach kind of parsing out where different pieces of organizational life go into those buckets?
One way that I found helpful to think of is that chat tools are often like when we're having a general office chat of the work that we're doing. So if we're in the office together, then we're probably reaching over to a neighbor and saying, hey, how's the progress on that bug going, or what's happening here? Those sorts of things that are just chat. But then there are times when you think, we've really got to talk about pricing or about this opportunity, and I need you, to actually come together into a meeting, and I think that's the biggest difference I see. The chat is like the water cooler, conversations that you have with your colleagues in and around, and it's not to say that those aren't valuable, but not all of that talk turns up into something which actually is going to change the direction of the company. Not that all meetings do that either, but the distinction I'm trying to make, if you like, is that there's a big difference between our water cooler conversations and then when we get together in a meeting to discuss a thing and make a decision, and that's the simplest way I find to feel about those, and the output of that typically is a document. So what is that document? And I think what we're doing with our tool is to also document the process of getting to the document. For example, we can go back and look into 2012 to the conversation that led to us forming a cooperative. So what were the things that we were considering at that point, and look actually at we have a record of that conversation. So we found over time that the more that we are doing this, in fact, this is why remote works well for us, the more we're actually doing this, the more actually we're documenting and building a knowledge repository of our organization and the history.
And then one other thing that came up that I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on is you mentioned the kind of annual retreat as part of the life of the company, and in some ways it's it's saying if you are working remote, then the time that you do have actually together as great apes all in a room, in one room, has is maybe more high stakes and maybe quite valuable, and there's certain things that you might recognize that simply have to be done in that context versus all the other ways that we can communicate with each other. So what are how do you approach that? How does that fit in that annual retreat as part of maybe the longest rhythm that you have fit into the life of the company and the way that people build relationships that work out through the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's critical, and we're late on our retreats this year, actually, for partly due to COVID reasons, and we're feeling it. I'm really feeling it. So that shows me how important it is actually to us and to our organization. It's our opportunity to, when you are working remotely, to actually work together. To come together. We do it very casually. You've seen the places, well, some of the images I showed earlier, the places we go to. It's an opportunity to talk together, to have one-on-ones, to have circle conversations, to do, sometimes we've had pages up all over the walls with post-it notes. It's an opportunity to eat together, to actually cook together. We set up typically little working groups of cooking. These sorts of human interactions are just so important. We even run a few. We'll quite often set up a bonfire or a circle in the evening over a barbecue, or just opportunities to connect. Somebody will bring some music. These are very human things, and because of that, it gives us the opportunity to recenter, to reimagine the vision, to check in again, on our purpose, and at these levels, to check in as humans. We've had work, we've had stresses, we've had conflicts, we've had all the things that you have in a day-to-day operations business. The retreat's the opportunity to come back and reconnect as people, recommit effectively, to each other and to the vision and to the work that you're doing on. And I think that I started off by talking that Loomio has been about a purpose. If you're clear on the reason why you exist, you're going to have discussions and arguments about how you're working towards that. But that purpose, if you are agreeing on that and you are developing your values and living out your values, this is your opportunity to reconnect as people together. And then, you come back from a retreat, you're recharged, you're energized, you have reset things. So, we may be chatting with MJ, and she says, well, this MJ's based in Rhode Island, by the way. And so she may say, well, I'm struggling with this and so forth, and we can talk through that, and then put in place something that will actually make it work better going forwards.
Great. Well, we're coming up on the hour, so I just wanted to invite, if anyone else has a final question, feel free to submit it. But otherwise, any final thoughts from this conversation you want to share before we move on and you start your day and I end mine, given our time zone differences?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And it's always a bit strange, as I said to you earlier. It's a lot easier to be able to see the faces of people that you're talking to than to be staring at a camera screen. So it's I think remote work is not natural to any of us. We're at heart social beings, and all the tools that we try to do to help us improve the way that we work together remotely, but they really ultimately don't supplant meeting face to face and working together as people. So I look forward to coming and seeing you in person, seeing when we can travel again. And if you have any questions at all, you can contact me through that email address. We'll put the slides up, I'm sure, later, and or you can just come into our contact channel through Loomio. Happy to help.
Great. Well, thank you for taking the time today, and thank you for everyone for coming and providing some good questions and some good thoughts. I'll be posting this the recording of this to the YouTube channel if anyone missed part of it or is interested in sharing it with anyone. And so I'll stop the recording now.